Coronavirus is declared a pandemic. The president initiates a travel ban, while major sporting and cultural events around the world are suspended or canceled. But at what cost to the economy? And will it affect the presidential race? Financial guru Steve Forbes joins us with analysis. And how do we separate truth from hype to protect against the coronavirus pandemic? Infectious disease specialist Dr. Michael HORBERG tells us. Islamic extremists are waging a religious genocide against Christians in Nigeria. Where is the outrage? The Hudson Institute's Nina SHEA and Nigerian priest Father Joseph Fidelis are here with an update. Finally, Welsh actor John Rhys-Davies reflects on his new role as St. Patrick in a documentary, I Am Patrick. The World Over begins right now.
Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. A great and important show for you tonight. Steve Forbes, Dr. Michael HORBERG, Nina SHEA, and Father Joseph Fidelis, as well as John Rhys-Davies, are all straight ahead. If you'd like to comment on tonight's show, send me a tweet. I'm at Raymond Arroyo. Lots to cover, but first, some news. President Trump addressed the nation Wednesday night, outlining the administration's steps in response to the coronavirus, which has now been declared a global pandemic by the World Health Organization. The president announced a ban on travelers to the United States coming from Europe, with a few exceptions. He also outlined some financial stimulus designed to mitigate the effects of the pandemic on American workers and the U.S. economy. I'll have more on this with Steve Forbes in my next segment. And after 2 days of hearings in the Australian capital city of Canberra, a 7-member panel of justices will take more time to consider, or reconsider rather, the case of Cardinal George Pell. Cardinal Pell is serving a 6-year jail sentence after being convicted in December of 2018 on 5 charges of sexually abusing 2 choir boys as Archbishop of Melbourne after Sunday Mass in the city's St. Patrick's Cathedral in 1996 and 97. Legal experts and supporters of Cardinal Pell are quietly confident he could be acquitted soon, possibly as early as next week, after Australia's highest court deferred ruling on his appeal. The case could still be sent back to a lower court in Victoria, where the earlier trials were held, but legal sources say there is almost zero appetite and zero likelihood of that happening. We will keep an eye on this story as it develops. And the coronavirus has also affected the way Catholic parishes around the nation and the world are conducting daily masses. The U.S. bishops have issued recommendations that include refraining from holding hands during the Lord's Prayer, ceasing the distribution of the chalice with the precious blood, receiving communion in the hand instead of the tongue, and not shaking hands during the sign of peace. New York Cardinal Timothy Dolan was particularly emphatic about this point last weekend.
Let's offer each other a sign of peace.
Let's not. All right? We're not supposed to with this, with the cautions going on.
Sadly, New York also announced the cancellation of the city's annual St. Patrick's Day parade, a hallmark of Catholic life in the Big Apple. Lots of changes happening to all of our lives and the way we conduct it. Joining me now with analysis of the pandemic's effect on the economy, his thoughts on the 2020 presidential race, and more, is the chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Media, former presidential candidate and host of the new podcast, What's Ahead. Please welcome Steve Forbes. Steve, thanks for being here.
Good to be with you. Thank you, Raymond.
Now, this coronavirus is beginning to have a massive effect on certain sectors in the economy. I want to start with what the president said to the nation on Wednesday night. Watch.
This is not a financial crisis. This is just a temporary moment of time that we will overcome together as a nation and as a world. Tonight, I am announcing the following additional actions. I am instructing the Small Business Administration to exercise available authority to provide capital and liquidity to firms affected by the coronavirus. Using emergency authority, I will be instructing the Treasury Department to defer tax payments without interest or penalties for certain individuals and businesses negatively impacted. Finally, I am calling on Congress to provide Americans with immediate payroll tax relief.
Steve, part of what the president is proposing here to rebalance the economy is a payroll tax cut, financial aid for workers stricken by the virus, aid to small businesses, and a Buy American executive order. Is that enough to calm the market and stabilize this economy?
I think what the markets are waiting for, is what actually will emerge after you get through the Democrats in the House of Representatives. And the payroll tax cut, which makes all the sense in the world, we did it in 2011, 2012 for 2 years, slicing off 2 points each year, and had some good effects on the economy. But the Democrats, for strange reasons, are opposing it. And then, two, you have the desire of some to attach non-germane pieces to this thing, make it a Christmas tree. So if it focuses on increasing the Small Business Administration to make loans to small businesses, helping out, which is going to happen to certain the industries that have been slammed by this thing, and a few other measures, I think the markets would heave a sigh of relief and say, good. But the fear is some of these so-called temporary measures will become permanent. The Democrats want to, for example, have a mandate that every company offer sick leave, including small businesses, which really are not in a position to do it. So if they go straight to dealing with the immediate emergency, extending unemployment benefits and the like, the payroll tax cut, I think you'd see the markets rebound.
Yeah. Steve, there was a report today that I saw where apparently Speaker Pelosi tried to slip in an abortion slush fund to do away with the Hyde Amendment so the government would be funding abortions as part of the relief package. I mean, this kind of thing means it's going to be dead on arrival. And the question is, will you be able to get the Republicans and Democrats working on a cohesive package that's sensible and that truly benefits the workers that are being affected by this virus?
Well, Vice President Biden, former Vice President Biden on Thursday, as we speak, was making a speech saying what he would have done as president.
Right.
Some of the things are sensible, such as emergency hospital beds and the like, temporary. But clearly they're making it a partisan issue. And so I think what it's going to be dependent on in the next few days and few weeks is public opinion putting pressure on Washington and saying, stop this partisanship, let's get a bill. And if that bill includes a payroll tax cut, the nice thing about a payroll tax cut is every working person, anyone who gets a paycheck, gets an increase in pay because the payroll tax hits at $1, not at the thresholds as you do with the income tax. So those individuals in the workforce who don't pay income tax would still get relief on this thing. And if they focus on helping businesses, helping those businesses and industries that have been slammed, and emergency measures like that, I think you'd have public support for it and it would sail through. But the idea with an election year, sadly, the temptation to go in for a political gimmickry is going to be, sadly, for some irresistible. So it's going to depend on how well the president does. But also, too, I think what you're seeing is Vice President Pence is getting increased public recognition and authority. I've had some Democrats say, oh, I didn't realize he was such a capable individual. He's coming across very well. So if public opinion turns to get that payroll tax cut done, I think you'll see this thing finally pass, not because the politicians want to do it, because the public wants it to get done.
Yeah. Steve, you mentioned Biden and his alternative address to the nation on Thursday. In it, he said this.
But neither should we panic or fall back on xenophobia. Labeling COVID-19 a foreign virus does not displace accountability for the misjudgments that have been taken thus far by the Trump administration. Banning all travel from Europe or any other part of the world may slow it, but as we've seen, it will not stop it.
Steve, your reaction to this idea that the president is somehow engaged in xenophobia vis-a-vis the coronavirus?
Well, it's a fact that the virus started in China last fall, and so his travel ban was perfectly justified. And in Europe, even the WHO and others are saying it's now the epicenter of the disease. It's gone from China, Asia to Europe. So a travel ban makes all the sense in the world. Now, you can argue, should have included the UK or some other areas? Fine. That's a legitimate debate. But the idea that we should have a temporary ban makes all the sense in the world. And the thing is, the one area where we did fall down on was our Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta really botched the initial measures to have testing.
Right.
They knew back in December this was a problem. Yet here we are, almost 3 months later, and only now we beginning to get any number of testing kits out there, diagnostic kits. And if we had had those by the millions by now, which we were perfectly capable of having done, we wouldn't even have a panic. We'd know who has it, where it's at, and be able to take laser-like measures to deal with it instead of the shotgun approach we're forced to now.
Yeah, and the president apparently cut a lot of regulations and red tape to move those tests forward and to get them created.
He did. One of the first things Vice President Biden did, Vice President Pence at the end of February, was get the CD off its duff, get it off of its turf-mindedness, and say, bring in the private labs, remove these crazy restrictions. And we're now finally going to get some kits that we should have had 2 or 3 months ago.
Mr. Forbes, we're seeing particular industries hit hard by this pandemic. Schools, universities are canceling classes, extending spring break. Large and lucrative cultural events are being called off. The Houston Rodeo, Austin, South by Southwest, NBA has been suspended. How can the economy withstand these kind of hits? And if this spread is not contained soon and continues for months, what do you see happening to the economy?
Well, the economy is going to definitely take a hit when you have these cancellations and the like. The energy industry is reeling, not only because of slowing economies, but this crazy war that Saudi Arabia and Russia have gotten themselves into for their own ridiculous reasons, mistaken reasons. You have obviously anything to do with tourism. You look at hotel rooms now, they're a fraction of what they were a few days ago. And yes, so there's really going to be blood on the floor, sadly. But the thing is, I think now we're going to be able to contain the disease in the months ahead when we have these diagnostic kits going, so we know actually what is happening. Right. And this thing eventually peters out. One of the things that I think you're going to then focus on is trying to get better ways of dealing with the disease, because it could come back in the fall. And eventually we'll have an actually vaccine for it. But once people realize that this thing is under control, tragic though it may have been going through it, the economy will quickly recover. What's amazing is when you look at the economic statistics for January and much of February, this economy was starting to really pick up steam again. Yeah. Investment was starting to rise again. Incomes were going up at a faster pace. So things were starting to move in the right direction. Then this thing came along. So I think once we begin to get this thing behind us, yeah, it'll initially be a little bit slow, but the markets will do it right away. They try to anticipate the future, and the economy will be doing well again. And then, of course, after that, we have to wait for the elections, because if you get a bad result in the elections, all bets are going to be off for 2021.
Yeah, I'm glad that's a great segue, because this pandemic is having an effect on presidential politics. I want to play this bite for you, and then we'll get into it. This is Joe Biden this week in Michigan, engaging with a union worker, and they started talking about the Second Amendment and the former vice president's intention to restrict gun use or put some restrictions on gun ownership. Watch.
You are actively trying to diminish our Second Amendment right and take away our guns.
You're full of
All right, thank you.
No, shush. Shush. I support the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment, just like right now, if you yell fire, that's not free speech. And from the very beginning, I have a shotgun, I have a 20 gauge, a 12 gauge, my sons hunt. Guess what? You're not allowed to own any weapon. I'm not taking your gun away at all. You need 100 rounds.
So when you were in Beto, when you said you're going to take our guns,
I did not say that. That's not true. I did not say that.
It's a viral video.
It's a viral video like the other ones they're putting out there. It's simply a lie.
Steve, you've been a candidate for president. Does this seem like a national candidate who is in full control of his faculties to you?
Well, I think what it demonstrates, and Joe Biden's had a long history of gaffes and doing things you wouldn't expect a candidate to do, is really what does he have the stamina to go through the course? And this is why you're going to see huge attention paid, assuming he goes for the nomination, gets the nomination, on who he picks as vice president, because given his age alone, given the pressures of that office, there are very good odds that he won't be able to complete his first term.
Yeah.
And because he'll be taking office older, at an older age than Ronald Reagan was when he left office after 2 terms.
Wow.
So you're going to see a real focus on the VP-ship and whether Biden can withstand the pressures of a campaign. So that's why Bernie Sanders isn't dropping out. He figures maybe Biden will falter. And you'll notice that that day that Biden blew up at that worker on the gun rights, you notice that evening when he won those victories in Michigan and elsewhere, his victory speech was deliberately slow, calm, like he was on downers. Try to be statesman-like, and try to overcome the image of him losing it. And he's lost it before when people have questioned him closely. He blows his stack.
Right. Well, the Biden
As we used to
campaign,
say.
you know, as you mentioned, you know, there was a convenient effort to avoid more situations like that. And the night of that big primary, what they did was basically cancel the rallies. Now, they did that because Cleveland and Ohio officials asked them to. But then he delivered his victory speech to an empty hall. Now they're saying they'd like to hold virtual events amid the concern about coronavirus. Is this a convenient way of dodging first major debates, major rallies, and allowing the candidate, mainly Joe Biden, to have a rest, take a nap for a little bit?
But the thing is, we have almost 8 months to go, 7.5 months to go before the election. There is no way you can cocoon a candidate for that long of a period of time. You got presidential debates in the fall. If he refuses to engage in those, there are 3 of them scheduled. That's going to tell voters why. We've become accustomed to them over the last few decades. Why are you ducking these? And I think in terms of Bernie Sanders, he's certainly going to be pressing for it. He wants to go head-to-head. Socialism's last stand in this primary season. So Biden, too, is going to have to face the press more. I mean, whatever you think of Donald Trump, no one can say he ducks the press. In fact, I think his handlers are all pull their hair out. He can't resist. He can't resist having a set to with the media, answer questions, and go back and forth. He does it almost every single day.
Before I let you go, it looks like the Democratic establishment and the party is trying to shuffle Bernie Sanders off the stage. Might they be running the risk of alienating Bernie's supporters in a general election and pushing them back into the arms of Donald Trump?
Well, you won't see them, most of them going in the arms of Donald Trump. What you will see, if they feel that they've truly got shafted again, is they just won't vote, or they'll vote for another candidate, throw their vote away on election day to some third-party candidate. But I don't see them voting for Trump. But one less vote for the Democrats is a virtual vote for the Republicans. And this is where we have to be very careful. Democrat disaffection with Hillary Clinton in 2016, you saw the turnout in key areas, especially in the African-American community, fall way below what it was in 2012. And that lack of voter turnout was one of the key factors in losing the Electoral College, losing the election, losing Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and other states. But you look at the turnout in the primaries this year, especially in Michigan, they were at record turnout. So I think that most Democrats are just going to come out one way or the other. And that's why the establishment figures they can push Joe Biden with all of his flaws, because they just want a body there to be able to take on Donald Trump. But as they say, the game ain't over, or whatever they say about operas. You can't say for politically correct reasons. A certain lady singing at the end.
There you go.
This thing is far, far from over.
It may not be over, Steve, until Biden does one more gaffe. So we'll see. We'll see how this plays out. But we're going to leave it there.
There are going to be more coming. I guarantee you that.
I agree. Steve Forbes, thank you so much for your insight. You can listen to Steve's new podcast, What's Ahead, at Forbes.com. Thank you again.
Thank you.
With the coronavirus now declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization, what's the best way to protect yourself from contracting it? Should it spread even wider? And what's the truth about the virus as opposed to all the hype and hysteria? Here to tell us what we really need to do is infectious disease specialist at Kaiser Permanente here in Washington, Dr. Michael HORBERG. Doctor, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
I want to start with the World Health Organization declaring this a global pandemic. What does that mean from the perspective of a healthcare provider?
Well, I think what it means for a healthcare provider is that hopefully it means more resources will be put into the situation so that we can do the things we need to do. Increase testing, better inform the public with science, put money into development of a vaccine and hopefully other treatments. All of this raises concerns with the hope, though, that it doesn't raise panic.
Yeah, President Trump last night addressed the country. He had this to say about who is at risk for the coronavirus. I want you to react.
The vast majority of Americans, the risk is very, very low. Young and healthy people can expect to recover fully and quickly if they should get the virus. The highest risk is for elderly population with underlying health conditions. In general, older Americans should also avoid non-essential travel in crowded areas.
So far, the most extreme cases, severe cases of those that have caused death have been found in elderly patients. Is this what we can expect going forward?
We hope so. We do see it's much worse in the elderly population. I'm not sure to say, though, that the risk for the rest of the population is very, very low, because that sometimes leads to complacency and not paying attention to preventive measures. Remember, most of us have elderly neighbors, family members, friends, and you would hate to have yourself get infected. You have no symptoms, maybe a slight cough, and yet you gave it to them and they develop a severe illness. That is a tragic consequence.
Yeah, I agree. A new National Institutes of Health study indicated, and this came out this week, that the coronavirus could remain viable in the air for up to 3 hours post-aerosolization, while remaining alive on plastic and other surfaces for up to 3 days. Is this virus more contagious than we were first warned of?
Whether or not it's more contagious, we know the viability is strong, and we know that, in fact, it has greater degree of potential fatality. That's why common sense things are in place. If you're going to cough or sneeze, cough into your elbow, use a tissue, immediately dispose the tissue, and then wash your hands with good soap and water for 20 seconds. Clean surfaces daily.
With what?
With either a diluted bleach solution or many of the common wipes that have with them a good degree of bleach and alcohol in them. These are very good common sense
doctor,
activities.
if it can float in the air for up to 3 hours, wouldn't it be advisable for the public to wear masks in public areas?
The problem with masks are, well, there are a few. One, that the mask itself can get dirty, then you touch it, you go more to your face and hands, and suddenly you're getting yourself more infected. Two, if you're in well-ventilated locations, the likelihood of you getting a particle is significantly lower. That's why we're seeing cancellation of heavily indoor activity.
Well, even outdoor events, parades. In New Orleans, they're canceling St. Patrick's Day parades. In New York, St. Patrick's Day parade, that's out of doors.
Yes, but there's heavy concentrations of people in tight spaces. And that's a different situation than, saying, taking a walk in the woods.
Okay, given this latest news about how long the virus can last on surfaces, is there anything else people should be doing besides cleaning them down? Or when I get on planes, I'm like Hazel. I start cleaning I'm cleaning every surface. Is that an overreaction, or am I doing some good?
I don't think it's an overreaction at this point, but I will say I'm not sure I'd be flying. Really? And I sure as heck not going to be taking a cruise.
Not at all. You would cut out flying in an airplane.
Well, right now there's so few people on planes, you're probably okay, but except for long distance, and I wouldn't take that risk. You're in a closed situation, recirculated air. People are coughing. People are touching food, each other. it's an unnecessary risk to take, especially if you're immunocompromised or if you are of advanced age or if you have lung illnesses.
Doctor, I want to share this with you. Earlier this week, the director of the CDC's National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases had this to say about the spreading of the coronavirus. This virus is capable of spreading easily and sustainably from person to person, and there's essentially no immunity against this virus in the population. It's fair to say that as the trajectory of the outbreak continues, many people in the United States will at some time, either this year or next, be exposed to this virus, and there's a good chance many will become sick. Now, this projection of people coming into contact with this coronavirus this year and next seems longer than first anticipated. As we said earlier, public events are being canceled. You would recommend then barring travel if you don't have to, and staying away from all public events? What about restaurants? What about groceries?
I think that's going to become a very tough situation. As we all are knowing that more and more we're going to have to buckle down on this and take responsible results so that we can control the virus, bend down the curve. If the numbers of people that are getting seriously ill keep going up, at some point we're going to overwhelm the health system, and that's an even worse crisis.
And that means you don't have the hospital beds, you don't have the personnel, or the personnel get sick.
Even more so, or the caregivers get sick. So, and all that downstream effect. Additionally, if we do develop medications, we won't have access to those medications. We'll be overwhelmed. And so a little bit of caution now is going to be worth.
For how long? For how long, Doctor? How long?
I wish I could give you an answer today. I don't think I can. I think this is going to be on a month-by-month considered basis. We're going to have to look to our leadership in the CDC, at the NIH, to give us good results. And frankly, even local governments knowing the pandemic in their community versus other communities, the differentiations and the regulations may in fact have to be different.
Wow.
We're just in such an early stage now, we can't give you good definitive
we don't know.
answers.
We just don't know how this is going to play out quite yet. To date, the U.S. has confirmed 1,200 confirmed cases and so far 38 deaths. With a virus of this nature, how fast do you expect this to spread? And I want you to compare this to the H1N1 crisis back in 2009. Just to put it in context, CDC estimated 59 million Americans contracted that virus. 256,000 were hospitalized. 12,000 died in a year. Compare it to the coronavirus.
I don't think we can tell you that today. What we know is this. It progresses rapidly. It is going without testing, without appropriate quarantining, good social distancing, good prevention efforts.
What does that mean, social distancing? Explain that to people. They hear the term, they don't know quite what that means.
That's fair enough. Social distancing means that we don't want you to put yourself in direct, immediate contact. Sometimes taking yourself out of crowded situations, taking yourself out of your family, out of situations where there could be easy transmission of the virus to you. Again, if your kids get it, they may not even know they've got it, or it's a mild cold.
But grandma and grandpa
could get it very seriously ill.
So social distancing, a good distance, what, 2 yards, 6 feet?
That's what we're saying at this time. A wave is a save. You want to be friendly. People do want their social contact. We understand that. You can't live in true isolation, but you got to be smart about it.
Right. Clearly, this is going to be worse than influenza, but which I heard some people erroneously say, "Oh, this isn't. This is just like the flu, and it's already claimed 20,000 lives." Okay, fair enough, but this seems to be more communicable and more deadly for the elderly.
It is clearly more deadly. It is 10 times more deadly than the flu. We're surprised and happily surprised that it doesn't seem to affect seriously the very young. That does not mean to say, though, if you're very young, you're immune.
Yeah, because there have been the 19-year-old kid in Seattle who died.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly. So, but it does seem definitely to be worse in older people, immunocompromised people, people people with underlying lung disease, especially if they're older.
Yeah, the Chinese are crowing. They're saying, look, we brought this under control. Well, you started it. I mean, let's not pretend it didn't start there. But my question is there any lesson to be learned from them that we can absorb? But given the draconian measures they took to contain the virus, I don't know if there are any lessons that are really
I think that's a real hard issue. I am not a social scientist, so I'm not going to get into all that, except to say that our society is an open society. And we rely a lot on individual taking responsibility. Again, I know I sound like a broken record, but hand washing, cleaning surfaces, not coughing in people's faces. You know, smart things that we do for a lot of other illnesses, a lot of other social situations need to be followed.
I'm going to bring something up that I've been looking into just in my own thinking. Are you concerned, as a specialist in this field, that the anxiety that is being created and some of the hype that's coming from my peers in the media, that perhaps we're creating such worry among people that we're actually weakening their ability to deal and fight the virus?
I hope not. I think that
But anxiety does play a role.
Oh, I think anxiety always plays a role. Again, not panic, but good prevention and good practice. We don't want to create unnecessary stresses on our own immune system, on others' immune system, on the health system. But we have to be smart about it. We have to raise awareness. This is a unique situation, and we have to change some social norms in order to bring down the virus, flatten the curve, so that it is manageable.
You think it's going to change American life severely over the next couple of months, at least?
Well,
at least.
I mean, we've seen the cancellation of basketball tournament of the NCAAs, and my own Boston University is in it this year. We've seen the NBA, the NHL,
Broadway movie openings.
But hopefully, by doing these things now, we are preventing worse issues later.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Doctor, thank you so much for the time, for your
pleasure.
insight. You can get the latest information on the coronavirus and tips for prevention at the CDC website, cdc.gov. Islamic extremists are aggressively persecuting Christians in Nigeria in what some are calling a religious genocide. How are they getting away with it, and why isn't there more of an outcry in the West? Joining us now with analysis is Director of the Center of Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute, Nina SHEA, and from New York, a priest who serves in the epicenter of the persecuted Nigerian population from the local diocese there, Father Joseph Fidelis. Thank you both for being with us. Now, last week, the Nigerian government finally acknowledged what church leaders have been saying for years, that the Christians are the target of jihadi terrorists in Nigeria. In a press conference, the Minister of Information and Culture there, Lai Mohammed, had this to say about Boko Haram. Quote, "They have started targeting Christians and Christian villages for a specific reason, which is to trigger a religious civil war and throw the nation into chaos. By targeting Christians, they seek to promulgate the falsehood that the democratically elected Nigerian government does not care to protect them." Nina, Boko Haram has been targeting Christians for almost 2 decades. Major General Muhammadu Buhari was voted in 2015 because he promised to rout out Boko Haram, okay? Why has it taken so long for the government to even acknowledge what Boko Haram is doing?
Yeah, well, part of the problem, Raymond, is that his Klansmen are part of the attackers, the Fulani herdsmen. He is a Fulani, and he has been reluctant. He's been accused by Bishop Kuka and others in the Catholic Church in Nigeria that he is, really protecting them and failing to protect the Christians who are being slaughtered.
And the Fulani herdsmen you mentioned, they are Muslims. That's the Muslim.
They are Muslim. And there's a radicalized segment of them that are coming into villages, slaughtering Christians, and 100% of their targets are Christian civilians. 100% of
Before
their
I go to
targets.
Father Joe, why should those watching in Europe or in the United States, why should they care about what's happening to a group of Christians in a far-flung country like Nigeria?
Well, you know, there are several reasons. One is our own self-interest. ISIS and Al-Qaeda are both there in this region, and they have joined together. The General of American Special Operations for Africa said this is the only place in the world where this has happened, where ISIS and Al-Qaeda are not competitors, but have actually joined together for ethnic cleansing purposes, for genocidal purposes, to eradicate Christian presence.
Father Joe, you work directly with the people in your diocese who've suffered trauma. What are they telling you? What are the cases you're hearing about on the ground that perhaps we haven't heard?
Yeah, thank you very much. Working with my people in Maiduguri, I work basically with people who have been internally displaced and live in these camps. And a lot of them are victims who ran away from their villages because their villages have been attacked or their loved ones have been killed. And so they have to run into the bigger center, which is in Maiduguri, to find shelter, and most of them live in camps. There in those camps, we meet men and women and children, but above all, women who have received various forms of violence. They have seen their loved ones killed, they have lost their livelihood. So you see suffering, you see horror in the eyes of them. A lot of them have despaired, a lot of them have lost hope, a lot of them are going through a lot of traumatic experiences, and they begin to tell you of not being able to sleep. They are not finding it easy to go to bed, and they cannot talk to people. They are afraid and scared. And so we go into these camps while we offer them relief and support. We also want to accompany them, giving them psychosocial support, giving them psychological aid that will help them to overcome these difficulties and pick up their lives, even as they live in the camps.
Father, earlier this year, 4 seminarians were abducted and one was killed last month. What effect did that have, and is it having, on the Catholic community in Nigeria? I mean, are people afraid to go to church? Are they afraid to evangelize? Nigeria is split evenly, 50% Christian, 50% Islamic.
Yeah, no doubt the big effect it is having on the general population is that people are afraid. People are afraid for their lives. People no longer feel secured. People no longer feel protected. Yes, people are afraid, but you see, people are also hopeful. We are people who believe in God, and we believe that we can go to God and ask for help. So yes, people are afraid, but they still go to church and look up to the religious leaders who can bring up their worries and difficulties and present them to the government and ask the government to do their responsibility of defending the citizens or providing security for the citizens. So yes, people are afraid, people are terrified, but they still go to church and they still worship God. Yes.
Nina, outspoken Nigerian Bishop Matthew Kuka, we were talking about him just before the show. He has charged that, quote, the government has created the conditions to make it possible for Boko Haram to believe the way or behave the way they are behaving. Is that the case?
Yes, they're allowed to slaughter and behead people. There have been about 24 beheadings of Christians since Christmas with impunity. And they're not punished. There's no defense. You know, when the Christians know the attackers are coming, they call for help, and the help does not arrive. They're stopping buses in various countries now in Africa and taking the Christians off and asking them if they're Christian or Muslim, and if they don't deny their faith, they're slaughtered on the spot. And yes, they're courageous people. Father Fidelis, I just had the honor of being with him on an Ave Maria Law School in Florida the last weekend for a conference on this. And he is incredibly brave because people have been beheaded on the road outside his city that he has to travel. And to travel to even come here. So he is extremely courageous. And you mentioned the seminarian who was killed, Michael Yadi was his name. At his funeral, Bishop Kuka, a Catholic bishop, said something very, very important. He said, Christians must rise up and defend their faith with their moral weapons. And he was saying that we have to really show our love. We have to, for these people who are being victimized, we have to pray for them. We have to learn about them and learn their names and press our own government.
Father Joe, what does that mean to you when you hear that quote, that we have to rise up and use all of our moral weapons? What does that mean? And also, it seems there was a 2017 Pew research poll that found 20% of Nigerian Muslims had a favorable view of ISIS. How does that affect Christians and how they are seen in your country?
Thank you very much. The question, how do we feel about the statement of the Bishop, Bishop Kuka, in his homily? It is true, we as Christians have never preached violence. We have never called for a revenge or eye and eye for an eye. Where we are being killed, we still pray for our persecutors. So yes, we have a moral courage, we have a moral weapon. That is what we call for. And we have many times called on people to be calm, to be prayerful. But sometimes when people are pushed to the wall, they become scared. And we normally will turn to the government and say, do your work, provide security for people. As of the fact of people having some leaning towards ISIS or favoring other forms, no doubt every religion you find the good and the bad. There are good Muslims and good people who want to live in peace. But those, for instance, who want to have leaning towards ISIS, towards other extreme groups, towards some fanatics, they hold those views. But does that account for what every Muslim will want? Probably that will not be the case. But when you find such instances, that is when the government comes in to say, people have the right to practice their own religion. Everyone is entitled to his freedom of religion and conscience, and people should have the peace to worship God in peace. So it is then the responsibility of the government to create that environment so that we can worship God in peace.
Nina, is the goal of Boko Haram here to incite civil war, as the government is claiming?
Well, its ultimate goal, Raymond, is to create a caliphate, to have to cleanse the area of non-Muslims and and non-radical Muslims. They want to radicalize the whole continent, and even the places where they've cohabitated in peace for many years, they are now radicalizing and turning violent, like in Burkina Faso. So yes.
Yeah, Nina, I want to share with you and our audience some of the destruction that Boko Haram has wielded and created in Nigeria. To date, it's estimated Boko Haram has killed more than 27,000 civilians in Nigeria, Christian and Muslims. This is greater than the amount of civilians killed in Iraq and Syria combined. Open Doors calculates more than 7,000 Nigerian Christians have been killed because of their faith in the last 3 years. And at least more than 1,300 Christians were killed by Islamic groups last year alone. The Christian Association of Nigeria reports that 900 churches in northern Nigeria have been destroyed. Father, is what you're seeing a genocide? Is that what your people are enduring?
When there is a serious displacing of people from their native homes, when people are killed and slaughtered and people are denied their right to worship in peace, what would you call that? People driven from their homelands, people massacred in large numbers, people killed in a very brutal way, people denied their freedom. How would we define that? Yeah. Is it not moving towards genocide? Well, it is left for people who have conscience to think about that. But it's a very, very serious situation. And what we are calling for is to stop that massacre, to stop the killing, the mindless killing of people in a very gruesome and brutal way. That is what we are saying.
Yeah. Nina, we saw a global outcry when those 276 Christian girls were kidnapped around the world. There was outcry and sadness. Michelle Obama held up the hashtag, Not Our Girls, Bring Back the Girls campaign. 100 of those girls still are missing today. When you look at those statistics, why isn't there more attention being paid? And what can the U.S. government do at this point?
You're so right. The African church is the beacon of hope for Christianity.
It's the future of the church.
It's the future of the church in sheer numbers. It surpassed Latin America in the number of Christians just this past year. The administration has named a special envoy for the Sahel, which is a selection of countries. Doesn't cover nearly all of them where we're seeing this persecution, or even all of Nigeria. We need to get on this. The administration, I think, is working on it, but we need to hurry. We need to start documenting this. We need to collect evidence of genocide and start bearing down on the governments of the region to do more to protect their own civilians. This is their first job.
Father, you issued a letter. You're looking for United States interaction and really world intervention here. What are you looking for? What are you hoping for?
From the American government and the powers that be, of course, there are channels, there are medium that can be used to make our government to stand up to her responsibility. So the United States government can help to bring help to our people through different means, through diplomatic channels, through trade agreements, through entering into talks with our government, like the envoy to Sahel that has been appointed. Why can't there be another, probably an envoy to the Lake Chad region that oversees that and is able to go into a lot of negotiation with our government or help our government to build intelligence, to build capacity, and see how those forces, Boko Haram, Islamic State of West African Province, and the Fulani that moves from one region to another, to bring about the neutralization of these people and stabilize the regions.
Nina Shea, I'm going to give you the last word here.
Yeah, we need to engage with the Africans. There's because it's the beacon of hope for the church, because ISIS and Al-Qaeda is establishing a caliphate there, and because of just Christian love, we need to get involved.
We'll leave it there. Thank you for making us aware of this. You can follow Nina Shea's reports on the persecution of Christians in Nigeria and all over the world at hudson.org. Father, thank you so much. We'll certainly be praying for you and your people in the days ahead.
Thank you very much for having me on this, and continue to pray for us so that we can have peace in our country. Thank you.
Thank you. He's best known for his roles as Gimli the Dwarf in the Lord of the Rings Trilogy and Salah in the Raiders of the Lost Ark, but he's now starring in a new film, a documentary about the life of St. Patrick. With St. Patrick's Day right around the corner, he's here to tell us all about it. His new film, I Am Patrick, the Patron Saint of Ireland, which opens in theaters in 2 days, on for 2 days, on March 17th and 18th. Please welcome the great John Rhys-Davies, who joins us via Skype. Thank you for being with us.
Lovely to be with you.
Look, now, I Am Patrick is based solely on the saint's writings. There's nothing in the film about the legends of driving snakes out of Ireland or using the shamrock to teach the Irish people about the Holy Trinity. What were you most surprised to learn about St. Patrick while making the film?
Well, it just reinforced my opinion that he is the most human of the saints that I know. And he is that original, authentic voice coming out of an age that has no autobiography at all. And his experience as a slave, men's experiences of slavery is all different. Some are crushed, some like Jean de Valette, the great defender of Malta in the Great Siege of Malta, spends 7 or 9 years as a slave in the galleys, and comes back with his resolve to keep fighting, alive and driving him all his life. I suppose there's that in common with Patrick. But Patrick's extraordinary circle for being a privileged Romano-British youth in an area that we would call Wales, but may have been Cumbria, from being privileged, for owning slaves, to being a slave himself and escaping. One of the glories of Christian civilization is the abolition of slavery. And never let us forget that is one of our civilization, of the world's great glories.
Now, John, I want to talk about the film for a moment, because it uses historical reenactments, expert interviews, and your performance to tell the story of St. Patrick. You play the older version of the saint, reflecting back on his life as a slave and eventually evangelizing the pagans. I want to show folks what we're talking about. Here's a little clip.
Christ the Lord told me to come here to be with these people for the rest of my life.
The preconception that we've got about St. Patrick is completely wrong.
It is slavery for life.
John, how did you prepare for this role?
Well, I'd obviously, I've been a history buff all my life. I know roughly the period, you just pick up the confessions, and the man talks straight to you, And what I love, what is so human about Patrick is that from those lonely, desperate, savage years being a shepherd, there has been no company except he has discovered that he can talk to God and God talks back to him. And this gives him a singleness of purpose, which is extraordinary. But he keeps listening to that voice all his life. And it reminds him that he has been nothing and God listened. And that he is nothing. But he is doing God's will. I mean, that extraordinary opening, I am Patrick. I am a sinner. I mean, it's an extraordinary opening to begin with. But the great thing is that singleness of purpose, which drives him forward, is coupled with this self-awareness that he is nothing, that he is humble, and that he has to have true humility, and yet he's human at the same time when he's accused of accumulating rights and privileges and respect, and his ego is getting big, and he's taking money from worshippers that should be going to the church. He is outraged at this. How the hell? You can sense the man sort of saying, "Well, of course I took these gifts. How do you think I'm feeding the people I'm training to be the new missionaries? How do you think I'm actually being able to give presents, to the kings here, the tribal leaders here, in order to break into their society so they can start to listen to me?" And you feel that anger. No, I must not be angry. I must I forgive those who do me injury like this. But you sense, I'd like to punch them. There's
that tension throughout the confessions, and you bring that to the performance. Now, you graduated from London's Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, John, and you were the only actor to star in the James Bond, Indiana Jones, and Lord of the Rings franchises. How did you know acting was your calling? When did you know?
Well, it wasn't my calling. My calling was to be a writer. I was 11 years old. I was a lonely, unhappy little boy in boarding school. And we had a great tradition of doing a great play once a year. And the first play I ever saw at the age of 11 was Oedipus Rex. And when Oedipus comes on in that beginning of that second act with his eyeballs hanging down his face, I mean, I knew then exactly what. Afterwards, I went into the senior library, which I wasn't allowed in, and found Aristotle on tragedy and learnt that great passage on tragedy. But that was the moment when I saw what was meant by through pity and fear, effecting its purgation of these emotions. Wonderful, and that was the moment I decided that I would be the new Sophocles or William Shakespeare that you would now be talking to me about. Didn't quite work out that way yet.
Well, you've found a better way to reach people, and certainly you've reached millions and millions. We just did an interview about the Nigerian genocide, what's happening in Nigeria. You, I know, have voiced concern about the Christianity in the Middle East and Africa being wiped out, and not just ideologically, but physically. Why do you believe the world is so passive, and what might this film on Patrick remind us of? I mean, a lot of people don't even realize he was a slave.
That's right. Throughout I grew up in Africa. I spent a lot of time in Africa. And I'm one of the few people, actually, who you'll ever talk to who saw a slave ship. My father was a policeman. He came home one lunch. He was very quiet. And afterwards he said, "Get in the car. I want to show you something." And he took me down to the dockside in Dar es Salaam, and he pointed out an Arab dhow, and he said, twice a year that dhow there comes down from Saudi Arabia, stops in Aden, goes down the Somali coast. On the way down, it's got machine parts and sewing machines and cloths and stuff like that. It stops here, goes on to Beira in Mozambique. But on the way back up, it's always got 2 or 3 little black boys. And they are slaves going back to Saudi Arabia. And the United Nations will not allow me to do anything about it. That was 1955, probably August, September 1955. Saudi Arabia didn't officially abolish slavery for another 10 years. So I had that particular bee in my bonnet. As for Christians, because we want to be fair to people, when something bad happens to one group or our group or nominally our group, well, we say that's really bad, but you know, of course, you know, we have done bad things as well. And there's this great need for equivalence. You know, all religions really are they're equally bad, aren't they? Really? I mean, just think of the things that you know the Christians did in, you know, in the Crusades and stuff like that. Well, and it's nonsense. You have to treat all acts of horror with the same moral indignation you can. But Africa is a place of horror. I mean, I love Africa. I grew up there. It's changing fast. But I mean, nobody said anything about the 2 million Christians who were put to death in the Sudan in the 60s. You know, I was in Dubai about a week ago, which is why I am confining myself and isolating myself at the moment. It's extraordinary there that the man, the Sultan, the Sheikh in Dubai, he is actually allowing a Hindu temple to be built. He is tolerating an extraordinary amount of individual worship of Christianity and stuff like that. There are people really working, you know, to try and level up society and to institute some sort of equality. And it takes a great deal of courage to do that. But you know, we are, you know, if we do not speak up, more people will be lost, and if we do speak up, then we will be condemned as being partisan and illiberal and besides, isn't the idea of God itself so antiquated? I mean, you know, really, do we need God? I mean, we can live perfectly moral lives without God and religion, can't we? Well, you know, freedom of worship is one thing, but if you start worshiping Satan in the most literal and absurd sort of way that is happening in the United States like that, you will create a measure of misery that will just encompass those around you.
John Rhys-Davies, we could talk all day. You're spoken like St. Patrick himself, I might add. I Am Patrick, the Patron Saint of Ireland, opens in select theaters for 2 days only, March 17th and 18th. Find out more at Patrick or impatrick.com. John Rhys-Davies, thank you for being with us.
Well, I hope you get to the cinema in those 2 days. And bless you all, and forgive me for babbling.
You were excellent. Thank you. Before we go, on March 24th, the paperback edition of Will Wilder 3, The Amulet of Power, hits bookstores. It's a perfect gift for adventurers as Easter approaches. Also, since you're stuck in the house, and you will be, it's a great time to read as a family. And now all 3 of the Will Wilder books will be in paperback. It's a great time to get it. Also, the audiobooks are available. Go to RaymondArroyo.com or WillWilderBooks.com for your favorite bookseller. Everything is there. That's all the time we have. Until next week, the show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Like me on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter. The links are at RaymondArroyo.com. Be sure to catch us next week. Until then, we'll be praying for all of those afflicted with this virus, that it will be swift and dealt with quickly, and that healing will occur in all families afflicted. We'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thanks for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo from Washington, D.C. Hopefully a healthy Washington, D.C. Bye now.